Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a complete plain study through the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are currently in Genesis chapter 4. We're talking about Cain. We're beginning the sad, sinful decline of man. And as also we should recognize that this is also God's plan of salvation in effect. So when Adam sinned, remember everything changed and shifted to now God's plan would be redemption. So there's a lot we'll see as we move on. How sin is sin, and what God remedy for sin is not reformation. So in other words, God understand that the remedy from Adam's sin is not religion, not reform. In other words, when you look at now man as we see him from chapter 4, which includes us, the remedy is not to just say, just stop sinning. Here are a list of do's and don'ts. That has always been in religious minds folly, foolish. And so to answer a whole lot of questions when people say, well, why doesn't God do anything? Well, he is doing anything because the way you change is you have to change the sinful heart, and that is what God is doing. He's changing the sinful heart. So let's kind of go back and we're going to move on, because what we talked about, and if you notice in the thumbnail, I used the word Cainism. It's a made-up word. In other words, Cainism is not, in a sense, how the Bible would use it. What I'm referring to when I say Cainism is how even today you can look at mankind and you can see that there's maybe three categories. One, there is a category of man who they're not religious, so they're not following any kind of religions, they're not following God, they're not trying to be. In that group, obviously, you can put atheism and agnostics like that, but just even the people who are they're just not religious. Then you can say there are people who are religious, who are following religion, some kind of religion, and they are following an organized religion, which we will get to later in chapter 11. But they're following an organized religion, and by the way, that's big business, right? Christianity alone has 2.1 billion followers. Islam has almost, I think, 2 billion followers. Hinduism, I think, has 1 billion followers. The majority of the world is following some kind of religion. Okay, we get to that. I can say how that started later down in chapter 11. Cainism, as I'm using the word here, and I'm only using the word for this context, because there are a lot of people that their approach to God is, God, I'm giving you what I want you to have, what I expect for you to accept. That's Cainism. Personal sort of religion, as it were. This is what I'm giving to God. You're not, in other words, not following a religion. There are masses of people following religions. Cainism is, God, this is what I'm giving to you. And you can find a lot of people who are like that. You can, in a sense, say, God, I'm going to choose this religion because this is what I want you to have in my life. There are people who have ideologies within the Christian church because what? God, this is what I want. This is what I'm calling Cainism. Okay? All right, so let's go on, and we're going to pick it up in verse number Um, well, I'll just start reading in 1 and then move on. Adam was intimate with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. She said, I have had a male child with the Lord's help. Then she also gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel became shepherd of the flocks, but Cain worked the ground. In the course of time, Cain presented some of the land's produce as an offering to God, and Abel also presented offerings and some firstborn of his flocks to their fatted portion. Now again, why did they know to make these offerings? It's not clear. It's not stated here. Offerings, though, is right here at the beginning of man, right? That's amazing. But Cain decided he was going to give what he wanted instead of what God wanted. The Lord had regards for Abel and his offering, but did not have regards for Cain and his offering. Cain was furious. This is Cainism right here. He was furious, and he looked despondent. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you furious? And why do you look despondent?" Now, remember I told you, God is merciful. He didn't change. He is merciful. He says, verse 7, "If you do what is right, won't you be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must rule over it." Verse 8, so now, what does Cain do? Does Cain repent? He takes his anger out, his hatred out on his brother, whom God accepted. Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let us go out to the field." And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. And the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's guardian or keeper?" So now you know where you hear people say that. Am I my brother's keeper? Verse 10, then he said, "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Now stop. Now I want to say this too, by the way, because this is very interesting. And you know I don't kind of go into the Greek and the Hebrew, but I think this is very kind of interesting at this point here. One of the Hebrew definitions of this word here, that this murder was so hideous. Think about this. There was an increasing amount of blood. Some scholars suggest that the way that Cain murdered his brother was he cut his throat, which would produce that amount of blood. But again, that's just, again, it doesn't say that here, but I thought it was interesting because we're going to see how the amount of blood that was spilled. Verse 10 again, then he said, "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed, alienated from the ground that opens its mouth to receive your brother's blood you have shed. If you work the ground, it would never again give you its yield, and you will be restless and wanderers on the earth." Now another quick kind of point here is that kind of interesting that the earth, just a question, how living the earth is, and that it does live unto God, and as God decreed, it wouldn't yield to Cain. Verse number 13. But Cain answered the Lord, "My punishment is too great to bear. My punishment is too great to bear, since you are banishing me today from the soil, and I must hide myself from your presence and become a restless wanderer on the earth. Whoever finds me will kill me." Now, well, let me go on and read here. Then the Lord replied to him, "In that case, whoever kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over." Remember this, because this is going to be very interesting coming up. And it says, "And he placed a mark on Cain, so that whoever found him would not kill him. Then Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. First and foremost, notice Cain says this, that my punishment is too much to bear, right? Because what can I do? Right? It's not like Cain. If Cain lived in today's society, he could go, okay, well, not land. I don't work the land. I work a job, right? We work in factories. We work in management, office, right? So, that punishment wouldn't be as bad today because, there are other options. But there were no options there. So, in other words, what was Cain to do? What is interesting to note here, and there's a lot to unpack with this, but there's interesting. How did, and remember I said too that the scripture does not particularly say that Cain and Abel was the first child. What you see is a godly seed versus an ungodly seed. And again, I'm not arguing if it's the first child versus first child. I mean, if they were or not. Notice this verse here. Let's go back. But notice this verse here. In verse number 14, notice he says, I'm a wanderer, right? Whoever finds me will kill me. Well, wait a minute. If they are the first children, who are these other people that Cain is referring to? Because think about it. If they are the first son, and I'm just again, this is just a thought, nothing to really divide over what I'm saying. Nor am I even saying that this is a definite statement of Scripture. Let me just be clear. The Scripture is not clear on this. But who are the people that Cain is referring to? Right? Hey, he said, whoever finds me. In other words, Cain is aware of people at this point. He's aware of people. All right, look at this. I got the wrong verse here. Verse 14. He said, whoever kills Cain, I'm going to go back. He says here, whoever finds me will kill me. If I'm the first child, right, and Cain was certainly older than Abel, why would I be thinking about other people? Now, it's possible he could, but I'm just saying. So anyway, that's the other thing. The other thing is, did you notice here, so God's respected that he puts a mark on Cain. He puts a mark on Cain. This is the first time now we see this whole issue of a mark. And of course we know that this will now follow. There are other examples of marks being placed on people, especially when it comes to the end times. So mark, we of course the most famous mark is the mark of the beast. A lot of people think today the mark of the beast is a computer chip in the hand or the head. Interesting, by the way, for those of you that believe that it's a computer chip. Is it only in the hand? Could a computer chip be in the head? Anyway, I digress. Here's the thing. The mark could just be a simple mark. I know this is kind of old, but just, right? But let me say the body could just put the mark on there, right? In other words, but it's just simply mark. But notice, very interesting, first time we see the idea of a mark. And then this phrase here, that he says, and Cain went out from the presence of the Lord in the land of Nod, and then in this phrase, east of Eden. So this phrase seems to be something east. Now, not referring to Middle East today, but it will be the phrase east. We're going to see this a couple of times in Genesis, and it doesn't appear to be a good place or a godly place, as you know. All right, so God makes this. God says that whoever The Lord replied to him, whoever kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times. Kind of interesting that everyone would know. We're going to see this coming up, and then and just down some videos down here. I mean, some verses where people are aware of this. So that's interesting that people are aware of this. All right, 17 says Cain was intimate with his wife. You can say had sex with his wife. She conceived and gave birth to Enoch. Then Cain became a builder of a city in the name, and he named the city Enoch after his son. Interesting again. So he did become, he wouldn't work the land, but we see where he kind of was leader of the ground. Now the Canaanites would become very infamous. Cain is a symbol of this sinful line. Okay, Cain is a symbol of the sinful line. All right, so let's see here. All right, let me running out of time here. I'm going to read the rest of this. Verse 18. Then it says, Arad was born to Enoch. Arad fathered Mehigal, and Mehigal fathered Methuselah, and Methuselah fathered Lamech. Lamech took 2 wives for himself. All right, I know I'm going to stop here. You know what? I'm going to stop here because I'm really running out of time. I tell you, I'm going to go over just a little bit because all right. So notice this fella here, Lamech. Notice he said he took 2 wives. So right now we see the corruption of what God's intended marriage is. The corruption of God's intended marriage. Notice that now we see 2 wives when God designed 1. So he says Lamech took 2 wives for himself, one named Ada and the other named Zillah. We also see how the wives kind of was subjected. So we already see this in place. The domination of men over women. This would not be good. This is not godly. Notice this comes from the line of Cain. And Adar bore Jabal, and he was the father of the nomadic herdsmen. His brother name was Jubal. He was the father of all who played the lyre and the flute. Jeliah bore Tubal-Cain, and who all made kinds of bronze and iron and tools. And Tubal-Cain's sister was named Naamah. Lamech said to his wife. Now, I don't know why he mentions his sister here, but we kind of see how God had put into the hearts of certain people certain skills, and that's what I wanted to point out here. Now, this in and of itself is not going to be a good thing, because as you will later see, the pagan rituals will come from these tools. All right, so he says here, verse 23, Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. Wives of Lamech, pay attention to my words, for I have killed a man for wounding me, and a young man for striking me. If Cain, verse 24, is to be avenged 7 times over for Lamech, then Lamech, it would be 70 times 70. Now, what's interesting about this, where did he get this from, right? In other words, God didn't tell him that. But notice we also say, we see the murder is beginning to happen. He says, I killed a man for wounding me, right? And a young man for striking me. So he said, if Cain is to be revenged 7 times over. Now notice, they already know, right? They already know what God had put into effect here. So verse 25, it says, Adam was intimate with his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth, for she said, God has given me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. And a son was born to Seth also, and he named him Enosh. And at that time, people began to call on the name of Yahweh. So this is why we see chapter 4, the dividing now, the establishment, you can say, of two different lines, one godly and the other ungodly. And up until this point, from Cain, and especially since from the time that Cain had killed Abel, now get this, men were not calling upon the name of the Lord. This is why Lamech had his perverted view of life. This is why he took 2 wives. And so now Seth would be a godly line, and this is the line we will follow all the way to Jesus Christ. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll pick it up with chapter 5 in the next study. See you then.